Today we're going to talk about what you really need and don't need as a beginner in the world of fishing. In a tackle store, you're going to see crankbaits and spinnerbaits and swim baits and underspins and jig heads and spoons and wacky worms and topwater baits and 1,000 other things that the store is hoping you'll buy. Let's go through buying a rod, reel, line, and a few basic lures to get you ready to go fishing. The biggest question right away is what you're going to be fishing for. Fishing rods come in different strength levels to handle different sizes of fish. Ultralight rods are best for fish that weigh less than a pound or two. These rods are excellent at casting light lures, light lines, and detecting gentle bites from a small fish. At the other end of the spectrum are the heavy and extra heavy rods. These are sometimes called broomsticks because they're thick and stiff. They bend about as readily as a broomstick would. You would use one of these rods for large saltwater fish or catfish, sturgeon, or other really heavy fish. The other reason you might reach for one of these heavy rods is if you're fishing around really thick cover, like thick vegetation or heavy snags. You need the heavy power to get a fish out of there before it wraps you up in a bunch of plants or a pile of branches. The weight of the rod is usually printed right on it near the bottom of the rod. Most rods will tell you the length of the rod, some sort of light, medium, heavy rating, the action rating of the rod, the weight of appropriate lures to throw with that rod, and the recommended weight of line to use. The action rating I mentioned refers to how much of the rod bends before the rod loads up and really starts putting pressure on the fish. A fast rod action means that only a small section at the tip will bend readily and the rest of the rod remains pretty stiff. This 12-pound carp hardly bent this fast action rod at all because most of the rod is designed to remain stiff and provide power. A moderate action rod bends readily across most of the rod, giving you good shock absorption but less initial power on a hook set. These rods are good for crappies and panfish and light hooks, where a hard hook set might bend the hook out or rip the fish's mouth. Look at how much of this 6-foot moderate action rod is bending when I hooked into this pike. For most purposes, I prefer a fast action rod. Most people starting out will be best off with a medium light or medium power spinning rod. You can catch anything from bluegills and perch up to bass, pike, walleyes, carp, or even salmon with these. When picking a reel for your new spinning rod, you can look at the specs listed on the reel itself, which will give you some options for the type of line recommended for that reel. It will generally tell you several different weights of line and how many yards or meters of line the reel will hold with each of those weights. A medium or medium light rod is well matched to a reel that holds 6 to 10 pound line. Expect to spend $40 to $50 for a decent beginner spinning reel. Now let's talk about fishing lines. You'll see 3 main types of fishing line in a store: braid, monofilament, and fluorocarbon. Braided line is expensive, it's really visible in the water, and can be noisy as it comes through your rod guides, but it's really strong, really sensitive for detecting bites, and has no memory or stretch. Memory is where the line develops kinks, twists, and coils in it that are really hard to get out. Monofilament line is cheap and quiet, it's easy to cast, it has low visibility, but it has a lot of stretch and a lot of memory. Fluorocarbon has less memory and less stretch than monofilament. It sinks faster, has low visibility, but it's really expensive and can be pretty difficult to cast. Each of these lines has its place, but for most people learning how to fish, monofilament line is the way to go. For a medium or medium light rod, I'd recommend getting 8-pound monofilament line for it. Berkley Trilene XL is my favorite monofilament, and it's easy and cheap to find at any sporting goods store. You'll find thousands of different lures and hooks and everything else, but I'd recommend starting with just a few options and getting good at using those. First, grab a bobber and a few small hooks or jigs for bluegill fishing. Remember that bluegills have small mouths, so keep those hooks small. Bluegills are a really common type of fish around the country, so it's a really great fish to learn on. You'll also want to buy a small soft swim bait, a small crankbait, and a small spinnerbait. Notice how I said small with each of these? Starting out small is best because small fish and big fish will both take a small bait, but most small fish will run from or ignore a large bait. Sometimes a little fish does have a big attitude, but give yourself the best chance of catching lots of fish by keeping your baits small at first. Grab a needle nose pliers and a line clippers too. These are going to come in handy for unhooking fish, straightening hooks, and cutting line. You can check out our Learn How to Fish playlist for all kinds of videos to help you set up and use your new gear, and you'll be catching fish in no time. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you next time.